Hi, my name's Phil and I like talking about politics, and an extra day hasn't made anything better really. The train wreck of a delivery by Boris Johnson regarding the next confusing stage of the pandemic response in the UK has, if anything, become more confused when he talked even more about it the day after. And there can be no other conclusion now that we have no functioning government in the country. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So no sooner was news coming out about the government's new strategy early on Sunday, it took no time at all for sycophantic Tory MPs to counter the confusion by saying how simple it all was. What's wrong with you? One moron even said that the vast majority of their constituents understood it perfectly clearly. What he didn't explain was how he'd managed to poll the vast majority of his constituents within the couple of hours that the new message had been released to the public and before Boris Johnson had even made his address to the public. A little bit of a poser, that one. But it didn't stop the sycophants in the party or the wider community banging on about how simple the message was. It's really simple. What's wrong with you? Simple, is it? Is it? If it was so simple, then why did the government change its position 3 times by Monday evening? 3 times on the advice for going to work. First of all, Boris Johnson, when he was talking about people returning to work, didn't set a date. He just said this is a thing that's going to happen. Then the government officially said that it should be on Monday. They meant this to take place the following day, Monday. Then it changed to no, not Monday, Wednesday. That's what we meant, Wednesday. And then it's like, no, but only Wednesday if employers have implemented the government's new guidance, which hadn't been released and still hasn't been released. So that's going to be released at some unspecified point later in the week. So it went from no specified date to Monday to Wednesday to wait for the guidance. Maybe Wednesday, maybe. I mean, I say finally as well. I say it finally got to that point. But that is assuming it hasn't changed since I've recorded this as well. And the worst thing is, it is no surprise at all that the message actually is deeply confusing. And I don't mean because of my low opinion of Boris Johnson and his government. After all, when you formulate a plan, you discuss it. You get people roll their eyes at the thought of committees, but committees serve a useful purpose. You need people to discuss it. What you've come up with. They need to be able to play devil's advocate. What about this scenario? What about this situation? What if this happens? You have to subject it to some robust criticism. You then use the feedback to improve the plan. And at the end of the process, you have a robust plan, preferably watertight. But that is not what happened here. The government didn't even approve the plan. Boris Johnson had recorded his message before he'd even met with his cabinet ministers to finalise the plan. Apparently, a few cabinet ministers were a little bit miffed about this. Not miffed enough to grow a pair and resign in protest, you understand. So quite happy to be a spineless sycophant still. Even Matt Hancock, who is clearly being lined up to be the first ministerial casualty when the criticism becomes too much to deflect. Now, the plan was not brought before Parliament for debate either, as it should have been, because that would have been another opportunity to test the plan with some criticism. There were also no cross-party discussions of the plan. Boris Johnson had promised that there would be last week. Didn't happen at all. So nobody at all actually discussed the plan. Nobody. It was presumably just handed to Boris Johnson by Dominic Cummings to read out on camera. We know that Boris Johnson didn't have a major role to play in the reading of it, in the writing of it, sorry, I'm going to come to that. Dominic Cummings, you would think, just handed it to Boris, says, read this out, will you? Opposition parties took no part in the consultation. They weren't invited. Devolved parliaments and the Northern Ireland Assembly took no part. Even members of Boris Johnson's own government took no part at all, which means by extension the civil service took no part either. With the possible exception of the Cabinet Office, it's possible they had a role. And in some ways it's quite amusing to think that the cameraman filming Boris Johnson's address found out about the plans before senior members of the government, including Dominic Raab, who was the guy pretending to be Prime Minister whilst Boris Johnson was off ill with COVID himself. But although it's amusing at first, it's also depressing, because what it fundamentally means is that the UK government doesn't have a functioning government. And I don't mean by that it doesn't meet my hopes or expectations. No government in my lifetime has met my hopes. And there hasn't been one that's even met my personal minimum bar of expectations for a decade now. No, I mean we objectively don't have a functioning government, because ministers are appointed by the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson in this case, to run their departments. All of those departments have a role to play in this new plan, if we charitably continue to call it a plan. The Department for Health needed to consider its role in the plan, but it was not told about the plan. Bear in mind, lots more people going to work now is going to mean more people becoming infected. That's going to put more stress on the NHS. The Department for Health needs to plan for this, but the Minister for Health, Matt Hancock, wasn't told about the plan. So he's now got to think about this now that the plan is set in stone. The police and the courts need to change as well. This new plan includes changes for them. They've got a role to play in the implementation of the plan. But the Home Office wasn't informed of it either. So the first we're hearing about it is now. Schools are mentioned because, of course, you know, this getting people back to work is going to be contingent for a lot of them on getting kids into some sort of childcare or into school. So schools have got a role to play in this. But the Department for Education wasn't told. Every department, every government department in some way or other has a role to play in implementing this new plan. And yet no minister and therefore no department was informed of it until it was announced to the general public. The first senior government members knew about it was when they heard it themselves on the telly. And government departments yesterday must have been running around like headless chickens going, he said what? What was that? What did he say again? Are you having a laugh? Trying to work out how they're going to come and come up with a plan to cope with the drivel that they heard the Prime Minister spouting out of his pie hole just the previous evening. That is not how a government can possibly function. So we don't have one. We actually do not have a government. That is just an objective fact now. Fortunately, we do have an opposition at last. And it was very much, you would argue, the ideal arena for a former Director of Public Prosecutions, as he leafed through the government papers, because Boris Johnson, I was as surprised as anyone, Boris Johnson actually did turn up at the House of Commons to answer questions. I say to answer questions, to field questions would be a better way of putting it. Didn't really answer any of them. But Keir Starmer was there with this, what was it, 19,000 word document that he'd only been given an hour before, and he was asking specific questions about it of Boris Johnson, giving him page references that Boris Johnson clearly didn't have a clue about, because Boris Johnson, who'd had this document for much longer, hasn't read a page of it. Quite clear about that. And you know, and no minister was able to actually answer any of the questions. They were a complete loss, and what they and their supporters were claiming was clear guidance. All they could say was just use your common sense. Use your common sense. I mean, surely common sense would dictate that if you tell a nation of individuals to carry out their lives according to government guidance, that you should at least publish that government guidance so people can read it and follow it. Not only is the guidance not available, there isn't even a firm date or time at the point at which I'm recording this when it will become available. I mean, let's see the Tory sycophants defend that one. I could do with a laugh. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that topic for now. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.